What about Bombaverk? Well, two important points about Bombaverk. Well, the one that he's known for is that he came up with a theory of capital and interest that was based on subjective values, that was based on people's time preferences. Now, it was adulterated with other factors, but basically he came up with the notion of time preference. That is, if I were to ask you to lend me $10,000 and you completely trusted me, there was no question that I would default, and that I would pay you back in 1 year. I would give you an IOU for, let's say, $10,000 in 1 year's time. Okay? Well, would you give me that for a firm promise, firm guarantee that I'd pay you back? Would you give me $10,000 today in exchange for $10,000 a year from now? No one would. Why? Because in the interim, you'd be giving up the satisfaction from that $10,000. Okay, that's the notion of time preference. Well, what Bombaverk pointed out was that future satisfactions have lower value than present satisfaction. A future sum of money has, dollar for dollar, a lower value than a present sum of money. So therefore, if I offered you 11,000 future dollars for 10,000 future dollars today, you're not exploiting me by taking 11,000 a year from now for 10,000 today. In fact, that reflects the fact that future dollars have a lower value than present dollars. Because in making the loan to me, you forego all the satisfactions that you could have attained for that year. What Bombaverk pointed out was that this is not only true in the loan market, but it's true when a capitalist invests in the structure of production. And he used the orders of goods that Menger used. Okay? And he called it the stages of production. So if it takes me 5 years to build a car, okay, then, or let's say I'm in the assembly stage of an automobile, and I know that I can produce a certain number of automobiles that will yield me $1 million 1 year from now. Right? Would I be willing to pay the workers, and let's forget about the raw materials and so on, let's just assume there's workers there. Would I be willing to pay the workers the full $1 million? Well, of course not. Okay? No one else would. Okay? The workers' value would be bid up to a level which reflected the time preferences in society. So if there was about a 10% time preference on average in society, if people preferred goods today to goods a year from now by about a 10%, then the total amount of wages paid to workers would be 10% less than $1 million. That is about $900,000. So capitalists would pay about $900,000 at the beginning of the process. Let's assume they pay them right at the beginning. And in return, they would get the capital goods that the laborers worked on for the year. And at the end of the year, the capital goods would be finished automobiles, which the capitalist would then turn around and sell for $1 million. He would get about, let's say, an 11% return on the $900,000 investment. Okay? So, far from being exploitative, what the capitalist does, the capitalist function in a market society, is to remove the burden of waiting for income from the workers. Think about workers that want to engage in a 5-year process. Okay? They want to produce bread from scratch. Well, if you think about it, before you can even produce bread, okay, you must have the wheat. First the flour, then the wheat before that, and before that you must have the farm tools. And before that you must have the iron ore. So it might take 5 years to produce bread. Now, let's say the workers could produce bread that would sell for $500,000, okay, as a group. And let's assume there's no capitalists. They'd have to wait 5 years for that income. Okay? Now, how would they go about doing that? They would have to save up consumer goods in advance, or they would have to save up money in advance. That would see them over that 5-year period. However, if there's a capitalist there who's already done the saving, and the capitalist invests the money, and in fact it would be a series of capitalists, different ones owning different stages, they pay the workers every 2 weeks, or every week, or whatever it is. So the workers don't have to wait for the 5 years until they get paid. They get paid every week or two. And they're willing then to take less than their marginal revenue product, less than the revenue they add to the final output. That revenue is discounted, as in the case of the auto workers, by the interest rate. So every year they get a certain salary that's, let's say, 5% per year less than they could have gotten if they were willing among themselves to produce a good and wait 5 years for the income. That's the return of the capitalist. It's not exploitative, okay, as Marx claimed. Even though the capitalist sat back and did nothing, even hired the manager of the plant, just sat in his chair and was, in Marx's term, a rentier, or Keynes's term, a rentier, someone who just collects, clips coupons from bonds, from investing, and lives on that. The capitalist has done something. At some point in the past, that person who has become the capitalist was a saver first, was someone who abstained from consumption, and may not have been even particularly rich, but abstained from consumption in the present and accumulated a certain capital that he then advanced to the workers before the product was ready for sale. I might mention also, not only did the capitalist investors or capitalist entrepreneurs remove the burden of waiting, also, as we see in the case every day of firms that lose money, as in the case of GM, for example, or as in the case of IBM, which in 1990, 1991, IBM lost $13 billion in those 2 years. Did any of the workers not get paid during those 2 years for the products that they worked on for IBM? Who lost the $13 billion? Did the workers lose a penny? No. They were paid. They may have lost their jobs after the fact, but for the product they produced that was not worth the cost of producing, they still got their full pay. So even though Bombewerk didn't quite go that far, okay, Mises and Rothbard did, we see that the capitalist entrepreneur also removes the burden of uncertainty in payment from the workers. Okay? All right, so that was Bombewerk's first important contribution. It's much broader than that. He actually developed, in effect, what Murray Rothbard has called Austrian macroeconomics. Okay? He developed a version of an overall economy much before Keynes discovered macroeconomics in 1936, quote, unquote. Okay?